Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention and about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Adam Galinsky. Adam is a vice dean and professor at the Columbia Business School, and he's published more than 300 scientific articles on all sorts of topics, ranging from leadership to negotiations to decision-making and ethics. And he's the author of 2 great books, as well as a pretty great TED Talk on how to speak up for yourself. If you're not one of the 7 million or so who have watched that, you definitely want to be. And his latest is Inspire, the Universal Path for Leading Yourself and Others. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here.
It's great to have you along. So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish more people knew 2 things, which is the first is that the impact that we have on other people in the world, so to really understand that how I act, how I behave in the world has a deep impact on other people, which is a kind of a profound responsibility, but also that each and every one of us has the potential to be more inspiring each and every day of our lives.
So leadership is a series of choices,
Yes.
right? And we choose every day how to act. And those actions, they have a disproportionate impact on those around us, for good and for bad. And you call this the leader amplification effect. Talk about the outsize effects of how leaders choose to behave.
So I've coined this phrase, the leader amplification effect, and it really just really captures the idea that leaders are essentially kind of on stage. And so that when we're on stage, people are looking at us. And one of the things we know from the foundational elements of cognitive psychology is anything that we're paying attention to, it has amplified signals to us, and then our reactions to that are intensified. And there's a couple things about leaders, because they're on stage, we're paying attention to them. Leaders also tend to have power. And so we feel dependent on them, which also makes their actions more meaningful and magnified. And so, what I like to say is everything we do, good and bad, big and small, verbal, but also nonverbal, right, really affects people in our daily lives. And, the other thing is that I want to emphasize about the leader amplification effect is that it's not just people at the top. It's not just when you're in a position of authority or leadership. It's really anytime someone looks up to you or someone depends on you or you have power over them. As parents, we are also leaders. And there's the corollary, the parent amplification effect, that occurs too. So the offhand comment that we didn't even realize we did, sends our kids into 20 years of therapy, and we have no idea that happened, right?
Yeah, these small moments can have major impact.
Yeah. And one of my favorite examples of this is, a comment that we often say to people, hey, come by my office. I need to talk to you later this afternoon. And it could be we just want to go over some numbers with them or just check on a schedule thing. It could be so inconsequential. But if we have power, if we're their boss, people panic for the next 6 hours. Oh my God, am I going to lose my job? Am I going to lose a resource? Am I in trouble? What's going on? And so, one of the things that I've learned over time is that once we become aware, right, of the leader amplification effect, once we become cognizant of it, it really just what we do. So what I try to do now, not always successfully, which is sort of ironic, but is I just say, hey, come by my office. I want to go over these research materials with you. It doesn't take me any more words.
Small change, big difference in terms of the effect that it has on others. So you show 2 paths that leaders can take in their leadership styles, one that inspires and one that infuriates. So can you take us through the difference really between what it means to be an inspiring leader, not an infuriating one?
So the scientific basis of a lot of it done, I've asked tens of thousands of people across the globe on every continent in the world 2 questions. I say, tell me about a leader that inspired you. So they changed you inside. They created this positive energy, this wellspring of hope and possibility. And so they do that. And I say, well, okay, now tell me about a different leader that also changed you inside. But this time they created a seething cauldron of rage and resentment, right? They made your blood boil. And what was it about that person? And I discovered a couple of really profound fundamental insights about human nature and about leadership more specifically. The first is that the inspiring leader and the infuriating leader are kind of mirror images of each other. So you talked about them as sort of two different paths. I kind of consider them more as a single path and opposite ends of this continuum. And so, for example, like just to give you some ideas, the inspiring leader is sort of like sees an optimistic big picture, whereas the infuriating leader is kind of pessimistic and pedantic, right? The inspiring leader is courageous and calm. The infuriating leader is an anxious coward. The inspiring leader is generous, right? The infuriating leader is sort of selfish. Inspiring leader elevates people, infuriating leader really diminishes people or demeans them. And so what you can start to see is that there's kind of this sort of continuum on which people exist. Now, what I just did in describing to you this is I actually set up 3 different dimensions on which this continuum is based. One is visionary, so how we see the world, so that big picture optimism versus pessimistic pedantic. The other is what I call exemplar, how we are in the world, that calm courage versus anxious cowardliness. And the other is how we interact with other people in the world. Do we elevate people or generous versus selfish and demean them? And then the third other insight, which I think is probably in some ways the most important, is that each of these elements is universal. So I've asked, like I said, tens of thousands of people across every continent. There is not a single inspiring attribute that's not mentioned in every country in the world, right? It's really universal. And so people hate micromanagers on every continent in the world, right? They love people that share success with them. They love people that see the big picture and help them make sense of their world. Now, the reason why these are universal is because each of these factors satisfy a fundamental human need. So being visionary, right, how we frame the world gives people a sense of meaning and understanding, right? They feel lost and now they're found. Being an exemplar gives people the sense of like protection and passion that they need. And then being a mentor gives people really solves this fundamental need of a sense of belonging and status for others.
So you could even say that inspiring leaders do for others and infuriating leaders do to them. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I have never framed it that way, but I really think that's a brilliant way of getting it. When I first started teaching, I like this sort of distinction between leadership by compliance versus commitment. And so compliance is really about like putting force and pressure on someone, and commitment is about building something up within someone that is motivating them. And so inspire is I like that it's really for someone and producing that type of reaction in people.
You mentioned that inspiring leaders share credit, and you've actually shown elsewhere in your work that leaders gain more status through a recommitment to values, and one of those values being generosity.
Yeah.
The more they give away in terms of their time or attention or even credit, especially credit,
Yeah.
the more they end up getting back. So how do leaders deliver on that in practice?
Yeah. Well, I'll take a step back and just say, if you give surveys of people, it's like, and you just ask them, what's something that happened to you at work that really just infuriated you, made your blood boil? You don't even put it in the context of leaders, right? You just say, what's a workplace infuriation? And one of the things that really makes people's blood boil is when they think someone stole their idea, or they took credit for something they worked really hard on. And, that makes sense. Like, we're trying to get promotions, we're trying to be recognized. And so there's nothing more infuriating than that. And so one of the things I discovered really quickly is inspiring leaders share success and take on blame. And infuriating leaders still success, right? It's me. But when anything goes wrong, it's you. And so that, I discovered that early on. But later on, about, even 10 years later, I started working with a doctoral student, a brilliant doctoral student, Maren Hoff. And we started realizing that people are reluctant to give others credit because they think it's going to diminish their status, right? Like if I say to Joe, you did brilliant on this project, people, I think, oh my God, he's going to get all the credit. I'm going to get nothing. But in actuality, when we share credit with others, we elevate their status, but we also elevate our own. So we talk about generosity, which is my single number one value in the world, not just like financially or through time, but even with your interpretations of their behavior, right? To understand, maybe that person barked because they were tired or because they were feeling insecure. If I give you credit for something, you're more likely to be generous to someone else. So it also has this pay it forward problem. So I like this phrase, spreading the seeds of inspiration, and generosity really does that.
Yeah, it's a virtuous cycle that
Yeah.
keeps perpetuating itself.
I want to just emphasize this one point. One of the key drivers of our infuriating behavior in the world is our own insecurity. And so when we feel insecure about ourselves, we're not our best self, right? We're selfish, we're pedantic, we're, anxious and not courageous. And so one of the things that we can do is we can try to solve our own insecurities. And one of the ways to do that is to really think about what your values are. Your values are a great way for it to stabilize her and to make you feel secure. And the other is to reflect on the times in your life when we're successful and we're powerful and we're in control. And that gives you that nourishment that is essential for inspiration.
I'm wondering what could be done even at an organizational level
Yep.
to create more of these types of leaders.
Yeah, I think, let me say two things about that, which I think is really important. The first thing is that one of the reasons why generosity is so important is when generous to other, we make them feel more secure, right? And so we're lowering their infuriating index. The second thing is that when we reflect on our inspiring behavior, it gives us the motivation to be more inspiring in the future. So I think those are some of the things. So what can we do as an organization? Well, one thing we want to do is we want to create more inspiring leaders because the leader amplification effect, right? When you're infuriating, it has this deep negative impact. It also creates more infuriating leaders in the future. And so one of the best things we can do is really help people be more inspiring. So what can we do? I think one of the things we can do is we can really capture these elements of what it means to be inspiring. So I created something on my website, adamgalinsky.com, called the Am I Inspiring Index. And so you can do two things here. You can rate yourself. It's an 18 item, 6 items for each of the 3 them factors. And sort of it gives you a score of where you stand, but you can also send it to other people and they can rate you. And so then you can see, oh, I might think I'm visionary, but other people don't. And that really provides a lot of value for people and to do that. So one of the ways is if we create inspiration as this incredible, powerful, positive force, this elevating force, we should then incorporate that into our performance appraisals of people. Like, are they actually being inspiring or are they being infuriating? And then we can also help give people the skills and the tools that they need to be more inspiring.
What I love about this is that at the end of the day, being a really inspiring leader starts with being a more complete person.
Yes.
And so the more we work on ourselves, the more we can help others work on themselves.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I think that I've been most thrilled about this book is, a CEO told me that it made him a better spouse. A Fortune 500 board member told me that it made her a better parent, a more inspiring parent. People have confided in me that they're better friends because of reading this. And so one of the things I think is really important is we're not perfect. We're not going to be inspiring 100% of the time, but we got to learn to forgive ourselves and really say what I did was not okay, but I'm okay. And then really think about how can I be that more inspiring person tomorrow, even if I wasn't that person today.
The book is Inspire, and the author, and he's inspired me with this conversation, is Adam Galinsky. Adam, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thanks so much for having me.